Hi guys, good morning. So in this video, um, we will be reviewing the first three steps of the accounting cycle. And I will be discussing with you the fourth and the fifth step, which is the preparation of the trial balance and the adjusting entries. So, but before that, I want you to get the answer key to the seat work that we just did last week. Because by answering that seat work, then we will be able to review the first three steps more efficiently. Moreover, by now you should be able to have a thorough understanding on the rules of debit and credit. What accounts are need to be debited when it increases, and what accounts are need to be credited when it decreases, and what accounts are need to be credited when an account increases, and vice versa. Okay? And you should be able to have an understanding of the double entry bookkeeping. If you're still having a hard time understanding the subject matter, I suggest that you review the materials that I uploaded, and you may always refer to your accounting book. Okay? Okay. So look at the questionnaire, the online practice exercise pertaining to Jack's Haircut Services. So on February 1, there is an investment by the owner of 1.4 million in the business. So if we look at the PowerPoint, 1.4 million is cash, diba? Cash yun. So if cash increases, so we debit cash. That's why in our answer key here, so cash is a debit because it is an asset, and the business, they receive an asset worth 1.4 million from the owner. Okay, so the partner of this transaction is Jax Capital. As you can see in our chart of accounts here, Jax Capital, it means it is the ownership interest of Jaxgo to the business. So going back here in the PowerPoint, diba I mentioned before that initial investment by the owner is an equity transaction. So if the owner investment, so there is an if the owner invested, there is an investment of the owner to the business as represented by his equity. So if equity increases, you credit equity. As you can see, we credited equity amounting to 1.4 million. So this is the concept of double entry bookkeeping. For every debit transaction, there should be a credit transaction. So for every value received, there should also be a value parted with. So for February 3, various furnitures and fixtures costing 30,000 were purchased for cash. So simple lang naman siya. It is simple to understand. So basically, the business bought furnitures and fixtures. Okay? So if you as an individual you bought furnitures and fixtures costing 30,000, then you will have an asset worth 30,000. Okay? So we debit furnitures and fixtures since it is an asset, and we paid for it using cash, diba? So when cash decreases here, as you can see here, when an asset decreases, you credit an asset. That's why in our solution, we credited cash for 30,000 pesos. Okay? So same goes with the other entries. For property, plant, and equipment, so as you can see, we bought two units at 100,000 each. So since trucks are asset, particularly, it is classified under, where is it? This property, plant, and equipment. See in my chart, in the chart of accounts that I created, it includes vehicles and computers owned by Jax Care Services. So since it is an asset, we debit an asset of property, plant, and equipment vehicles amounting to 200,000, and we paid for it using cash. That's why we credited cash. Okay, so I'll skip some of the transactions, so basically they're just the same. It is a purchase of an asset using cash. Okay, so let's go to February 8th. February 8th, purchase hair supplies on account from Edward Scissorhands Company. So the amount is 5,000 payables, pay 5,000 pesos payable on February 25. Okay? So we bought now an asset, particularly supplies. So hair supplies. Supplies, hair services, as you can see in the chart of accounts, we have supplies. So this should be hair services. So it is an asset because we have not consumed it yet. Diba? Supplies are asset that have not yet been consumed, expired, or used. Okay? So it still has value to us. So basically, when we bought it, we debit 5,000 because it is an asset. As you can see here, asset, if an asset increases, we have to debit asset. Now, we are crediting accounts payable. Why not cash? Okay? Sige. So, we credit accounts payable. And as I have mentioned, why not cash? Because if you will analyze the transaction, diba, the first step in the accounting cycle is we analyze transaction through source document. However, in this case, we are not analyzing source document, rather we are just analyzing transaction. But basically, when you purchase something, you have to analyze the source document. So, for example, in the source document, it is stated that it is still payable on February 25, 2019. Meaning, we have not paid for it yet. So, we are not supposed to credit cash, or we should not supposed to credit asset. Rather, we should credit a liability account. Okay? Because we have not yet paid for it. So basically, we have utang, 'di ba? We owe something. It is just like buying something using a credit card. 'Di ba? You didn't pay you for that using cash. So you use the card because you borrowed money from the bank. So here we have an asset, supplies and hair services, and then we credit liability because we haven't paid for it yet. Okay? So basically, the transactions, it is just like it is telling some stories. Okay? You just have to account. So what is being mentioned. And remember, double entry bookkeeping. For every debit transaction, there should be a corresponding credit transaction. Okay? Next. So let's move on to how about February 11? Sige, February 11. So we received 20,000 pesos from services to customers. Okay, so basically we receive cash. See, it is mentioned, we received 20,000 pesos. So what is 20,000 pesos? Cash. What is cash? An asset. Again, what is an asset? If an asset increases, we debit the asset. Okay? Because the normal balance of cash is debit. Normal balance of asset is debit. Means that if an asset increases, we debit the asset. So we debit cash. And then it was mentioned that we render services. We perform services to the customer. When you perform services to the customer, basically, you earn the right to receive the money. So since you earn the right, you have earnings, which is an income. Okay? So you perform services. So ginupitan mo sila ng buhok. Then they should pay for you because it is your income. Okay? So you credit revenue of service revenue of 20,000. See, if you look at here, diba? Income is credit. So the normal balance of income is credit. So when there is an income, you credit. So you credit service revenue because you perform services. And you debit cash because they paid you for these services. Okay? Now moving on to February 12. On February 12, it is mentioned that we render services on account. Meaning, we render services to VIP customers for 12,000 pesos. Question, did we receive cash? No, we did not. See, it is still due on February 20. 20. So we will receive the cash on February 20. And since we didn't receive a cash, so what will we debit? Basically, you will have a receivable, okay? Receivable is something that you have not yet received, but you are supposed to receive it, okay? So, kung merong may utang sa'yo, dapat singilin mo sila, okay? Because you have a receivable. They owe you. May utang sila sa'yo, so they have a payable. You naman, you have a receivable. So going back to the solution, since we have not yet been paid by the VIP customers, then we will debit accounts receivable because it is also an asset. And then, as I have mentioned, since we perform services, we should credit revenue, okay? Because we earn it. We perform services, okay? Yan. So let's look for other examples that I feel like I should discuss. So let's move on to February 20. Okay? On February 20, we collected half of the amount billed to the VIP customers last February 12, 2019. O di ba, last February 12, we have a receivable because we have not yet received the payment of the VIP customer. Now naman, it is saying that we have already collected. Okay? So what will happen when you collect something, you will receive cash, 'di ba? Collected, nakolekta mo na. Nakolekta mo na yung utang sa'yo. It means that you will debit cash because you receive an asset which is cash. And then you will credit receivable. Why? Because na-receive mo na yung utang sa'yo. However, kalahati lang. Only half was received. See? Collected half. Okay. So basically, your receivable of 12,000, half of it was already collected. So you have to decrease your receivable by 6,000 because this receivable has already been collected. Okay? So increase in asset, cash, and decrease in another asset, which is the receivable. Okay? Because you have already collected the receivable. Okay? So moving forward, on February 25, what happened on February 25? So ito naman, we paid Edward Scissorhands Company in full for purchases made on February 8, 2019. If you observe on February 8, we have an accounts payable of 5,000 pesos. Why? Because when we bought this asset, we did not pay Edward Scissorhands Company cash. So basically, we have a liability to Edward Scissorhands Company. May utang tayo sa kanya. So we have accounts payable. As described here in the chart of accounts, accounts payable, this pertains to the account owed by Jack's Her Services to its suppliers. Okay? So accounts payable should be credited on February 8. However, since we have already paid for it in February 25, then mawawala yung accounts payable. Why? Kasi wala ka ng utang. If you look at this one, the PowerPoint, liabilities is on the credit side. What happened if you have already paid your liabilities? Your liabilities will decrease. And if you look at it, a decrease in a liability is a debit, di ba? Now, we go back here, we debit accounts payable and we credit cash because our cash decreases naman. It is the one that we use to pay for the accounts payable. So the liability decreases, we debit the liability, we credited asset, the cash, because the cash decreases. Now, remember guys, when we pay liability, it does not necessarily mean that we can only use cash to pay for the liability. So remember, in accounting, all transactions, as long as it is legal, so it is allowed. Okay? So you may pay your liabilities maybe using some other asset. For example, you may pay your liabilities, these accounts payable, using your vehicles, 'di ba? So parang ganito 'yan. It's just like this. May utang ako halimbawa sa inyo. Oh, wag mo na akong singilin. Bigay ko na lang sa iyo yung cellphone ko. This is more than enough to pay for my utang. So it is allowed. Okay? But you will deal with that, the accounting treatment, in the future. Okay? So future nyo na lang siya alamin. Okay? But for the sake of our discussion, allowed siya. Okay? I want to go back pala on February 13. If you notice here, February 13, we paid half month salary of employees. So the salary of the employees is 20,000 pesos per month. Okay? So we paid half. Where is it? So we paid half, 10,000. Half month salary. So 20,000 divided by 2 is 10,000. So we paid using cash. And on February 27, we paid the remaining amount. Okay? So we paid, I'll just make this 28, huh? So we paid another 10,000. So salaries and wages is an expense. Okay? It is an expense. So it is basically the sweldo of the employees. Gastos natin yun. Okay? We are paying them. So we paid them cash. Okay? So nagbayad tayo ng cash. So same story for rent and utilities. I forgot to differentiate the utility as a different account. So I just combined them for the sake of this discussion. Okay? So rent and utilities expenses, 21,000. You just add them up. And you credit cash because we paid for it. Okay, so the description is monthly rentals and utilities. Guys, in journalizing a transaction, you should always indent the credit part. Meaning, you should put spaces, okay, for easy understanding, okay? And it is mandatory that you put a short description. Why? To avoid confusion, okay? So that users can understand the transaction, okay? So basically, the code you are seeing here is basically the chart of accounts. But the main purpose of this PR code, PR, okay, posting reference, is for you to be able to cross-refer this transaction to the ledger. Meaning, para hindi kayo malito. See, tingnan mo. If you look at this, cash, 100, PR 100. So if you look at the ledger, you can easily look for the PR, this account, 100. Now, if you are in the ledger naman, the posting reference is the page number. Because there are so many transactions, diba? There are so many transactions, users of financial information might get confused. So for example, bought 2 trucks from Rep Incorporated, diba? So where will I look for that? If there are so many page numbers, we will get confused. That's why in the posting reference of the ledger, it is not the account because it is already here. It is pointless to add the code, the account code here as well. So you should put the page number from of the journal where the transaction is located. So original investment of Jax. So page 1. So you will not get confused. Oh, on page 1. See, page 1, it is here. Original investment. Okay? So cross-referencing to avoid confusion. Okay? So what else? Um, let's discuss February 28 transaction where the company borrowed money. So on February 28, the business borrowed money from the bank. When you borrowed money from the bank, so you'll get money because you borrowed money, di ba? So meron kang pera. And then you have utang. You have a liability to the bank. It is represented by this account. Loans payable. It is written here in the chart of accounts I created. So loans payable pertains to the money owed by Jack's Haircut Services to its creditors. So may utang tayo with our creditors, which is the bank. Okay? Next transaction is withdrawal. Diba? So, withdrawal. When you withdraw money, you credit cash because the cash decreases. So the owner get his share of cash from the business. So the business's cash will decrease, and when an asset decreases, you credit an asset. That's why here we credit cash and we debit withdrawal because withdrawal is a decrease in the equity, and a decrease in the equity is a debit, di ba? So basically, the owner's share to the business will decrease. That's why it is a debit to equity. Okay? Okay, so what we will discuss next is the second step in the accounting cycle. I mean, the third step. The first step is analyzing business transaction through source documents. The second one is this one, the one we just did. So journalizing or recording the transaction in a journal. Okay? So this is a manual journal that I just put in the Excel. Okay? And then the third one is posting or transferring of the entries, these entries, to the ledger. Okay, so we will transfer it to the ledger. Ano bang ledger? So ledger is this one. It is a group of accounts. Okay, it is also known as the book of final entry. So a ledger contains the entire set of accounts. So this one, these are the accounts, entire set, and those ones used by the business. So the effect of business transaction are summarized in the individual account. So see, we summarize all the entries here. Okay. So the first step, of course, you should post the date of the transaction. Okay. And then using an account number as provided in the chart of accounts, you have to put the account code here because this is where your transaction from the journals be cross-referenced so that they will not be confused when they look for the transaction. For example, this one, 300, cash capital, Jack's capital, posting reference 300. When they go to the ledger, where is the 300 here? So it's here, 300. So they will post the journal entries here in account 300. Okay? And then you write the date, diba? After writing the date, you write in the reference column the page of the journal where the entry came from. So this one, the page, as I have already mentioned a while ago. And then you write the debit amount or credit amount. Okay? So in this example, so for cash, since most of the transactions are related to cash. So for example, in February 1, so our cash increases. So basically it is a debit. So when you post this on the ledger, so you look at posting reference 100, so you go to 100. So since it is the first transaction, February 1, you debit 1,400,000 because it is the original investment of Jax, the owner. So you will write the particulars or description here, or explanation. Okay, explanation. So we will write it here. Original investment of Jax. So debit 1.4 million since it is an increase in asset. Okay, it is an increase in cash. What I mean. So you're just forward the balance here. So the balance at the end of February 1 is 1.4 million. The balance at the end of February 3 is 1,370 because we bought furnitures using cash. See, February 3, our cash decreases by 30,000. So in the general ledger, the cash also decreases by 30,000 as represented by the credit. So the balance is just 1,370. And move forward to February 11. So we have an increase in cash because we have a revenue. If you look at the journal, February 11, see, cash is debit. We perform services to cash customers. So basically, they pay us money worth 20,000. So our cash again increases on February 11 by 20,000. So 1,067,000 plus 20,000, it is 1,087,000. So you do that for all the transaction. So at the end of February 28 or at the end of the month, so the balance of cash is 1,087,000. So from 1.4 million, it became 1,087,000. So you do that for all the accounts. So you just transfer. Some accounts only have one entry here. Their partner is probably here in cash. Okay. Partner credit, partner debit or credit. So you do that. Okay. So you just forward the balance to the ledger, find the account, write the page number, forward the balance. You do that for all. For representation expense, there is no transaction because the last transaction in the question is just to confuse you. Remember the separate business entity concept. Okay? Okay. So, cash withdrawal is a debit. So the balance is 10,000 debit balance. So basically, I forgot to write the account code. Anyway, you just have to refer to the chart of accounts that I created. Now, I will discuss to you the trial balance. Okay? So after all transactions for the period have been posted to the ledger, this one, the balance for each account is determined. See, this is the balance of each account. I bolded them. See, bold. This one has zero balance, the accounts payable. At the end of February, we don't have an accounts payable anymore because we paid for it. So every account will either have a debit balance or a credit balance or a zero balance, just like the balance here in accounts payable. So a trial balance, so I'll go here. This is the fourth step in the accounting cycle, by the way. This one, the trial balance. Okay. So it indicates whether the total debits, here, the total debits, and the total credits are equal. Okay. So this only proves, however, that all entries recorded have debit and credits. Okay. It does not guarantee, okay? It may be correct, but it does not guarantee that all transactions have been recorded, okay? So for example, in this journal entry, meron palang transaction. So there are transactions that we have not considered. For example, February February 9, for example. February 9. So there is a transaction that was not included. So basically, our journal entries is lacking. It means it's kulang. Something is missing. Therefore, the trial balance will still equal. However, it is not correct because there is a missing transaction. So you get me? So the trial balance represents or proves that the debits and credits are equal. So mag-equal naman talaga sila because of the double entry bookkeeping. Now, for example, I did not do the double entry bookkeeping. For example, here, I only recorded the debit. I did not record the credit. So look at your trial balance. So what did I delete? The cash on February 3. So the cash on February 3, 117. Hold on. Okay, so look at it. If I did not record the double entry or the partner of these furnitures and features, for example, I delete this one. Look at our trial balance. See, it will not equal. So there is a difference of 30,000. That's what's going to happen if you don't follow the double entry bookkeeping. So I'll put the entry back. Okay? Galing, 'di ba? So now they don't have any differences. Okay? Okay, so going back to the PowerPoint, guys, the PowerPoint that I sent you, it is not all inclusive. This is just a summary of the discussion. So you may still have to refer to your book for additional explanations. For example, the procedures for preparing a trial balance. So it is not included in the PowerPoint. So you have to look at your book or any other book or be resourceful and look for it in the internet. Okay? So, trial balance is prepared, okay, on a separate sheet of paper. So you have to indicate the heading. Okay? In this example, our heading is dito na lang. It's Happy Birthday Company. Okay? And then you write the title of the report. So it is a trial balance and the date, December 31. In this case, February 28th. Okay? So you should determine the total of the debits and the credits. So it is also known as footing. Footing means you add up the debits and you add up the credits. Okay? You foot them. Okay? To ignore our example here in the PowerPoint because we are already making our sheet work as the example. Okay? Now, for example, if you look at the second one, this one, so if the difference is divisible by 9, this suggests a transplacement error or a transposition error. Okay? So what is a transposition error? So a transposition error is an error, a simple error of data entry that occurs when two digits that are either individual or part of a larger sequence of numbers are accidentally reversed. So look at the example. So that is a transposition error. Okay? A transplacement error occurs when the decimal point has been entered in the wrong position. So, yan, example, or instead of 150, we make it 15 pesos. So that's an example of a transplacement error. Okay? So, in our example here, so diba this is 30,000 pesos cash. For example, we have put it as, we mistakenly recorded it as 3,000. Okay? So the trial balance, the difference is 27,000. It states that if the difference is divisible by 9, it's divisible by 9. It suggests that there is a transplacement or transposition error. So if you look at the journal entries, so you look at the balances, you look at the debits and the credits, and then you found this. So, the credit is supposed to be 30,000. However, there is a transplacement error. That's why it is just recorded for 3,000. So you correct that. Okay? So your trial balance will now again be equal. Okay? So we will be practicing the entries, the trial balance for next week. Okay? And then after that, we will proceed with the adjusting entries. So I will upload some exercises in the Blackboard. So make sure to look at it and answer it. I suggest this one you should pass so that there is something that I can record for your grades. Okay, so you may help each other. Okay, but just don't copy. Okay. So when the trial balance is not balanced, okay, it signifies that there was an error committed along the process, which may be any of the following. So error in footing the debit in the credit. So here in our example, for example, I delete this or I add them. Nagkamali ng add. Since this is computerized, maybe I add them manually. And then when I add them, my total is 1.4 million. So I made the mistake in adding. So one of the reasons why the trial balance will not be equal. Okay? So wrong footing or wrong adding. And then another example is, for example, error in transferring from the ledger to the trial balance. I know. Error in transferring from the ledger to the trial balance. So for example, our ledger, the amount of Jack's capital is 1.4 million. However, when I transferred it to the trial balance, I put 1,450. Okay? So there is an error in the trial balance. Okay? So errors in posting. Say posting a debit entry to the credit side of the account. So what happens naman error in posting daw? For example, here, instead of crediting cash of 10,000 pesos, on February 7. What I did though was cash. Here, what I did though is I put it in the debit. See? Again, your trial balance is not equal. Okay? Yan. So, what else? Error in journalizing. For example, if the debit side is not equal to the credit side. So, I'll go back here in our journal entry. So, error in journalizing. For example, my furniture and fixture is supposed to be 35,000. For example, I recorded the furnitures and fixtures for 35,000 instead of just 30,000. So, if you look at the trial balance, there's a difference of 5,000 pesos. Okay? Those are example of the causes of why the trial balance will not equal. Another one, error of omission. When the debit is posted but the credit is not posted. So I think I have made an example before. For example, I didn't post the credit. Okay? So it's missing. So there's a difference of 30,000 in my trial balance. Okay? So those are the reasons why the trial balance will not be equal. Okay, so let's proceed in locating an error. Okay, here. So in locating an error, recheck the footing of the debit column and the credit column of the trial balance. So in our example, we have to recheck the debit and credit column. Okay. So initially this is equal. However, assuming in our example the amount of furniture of cash of 30,000 that was credited was put in the debit. 30,000 in the debit. Okay? So there is an error, diba? If you look at the trial balance, so wait lang, I'm fixing the formula. Yeah. So if you look at the trial balance, hold on. So if you look at the trial balance, the difference is 60,000 because we put the amount on the debit side instead of the credit side. So tips for determining the error is you divide the difference by 2. 60,000 divided by 2. So the answer is 30,000, the amount of the error. So if you trace the error back to the entries, you look for an amount worth 30,000. Ooh, 30,000 here, I found it. So it should be on the credit side. Okay, look at the trial balance. So it is now correct. Okay, so you divide the difference by 2. Okay,